I'm with CAM Systems Group, and I'm pleased to be with you here today to talk a little bit about earned value management, what it is, why it's different, why you might consider this as an additional tool or technique within your overall program management approach. We will focus on a couple of issues. First, to kind of just provide a basic introduction in terms of what earned value is. And then secondly, to talk about how we might implement earned value in order to be able to do it effectively and deliver the benefits and results that we would expect to see. That you'll see there in the second area in terms of why might you consider this, why would you do it. And then lastly, we'll begin to talk a little bit about how would you go about implementing this particular approach, adding it to your toolbox, if you will, in terms of how you do program management, what some of the challenges are, what some of the successful approaches have been, and then we'll summarize and, of course, reserve some time at the end for questions. Our webinar overall is scheduled for an hour from 1 to 2. We expect to have at least 15 to 20 minutes at the back end for any of you to provide your observations and follow up with any questions as we move through the material. All right, so the first thing I'd like to do is begin to discuss a little bit about how do we do things today in terms of managing programs. What I have here titled is a traditional management approach, and then compare and contrast that to the earned value management approach. So what I'm presenting here for your consideration is, a little bit of a scenario. Here we've got a 12-month project. You can see that we've laid out a budget of about 60 units of resources required to perform the program. And you can see time now is the end of June. We've got some actuals we've been tracking in terms of resource consumption. We were comparing that to our original budget. And then, of course, we also have a schedule. And the triangles below are indicating some milestones that have been completed and those that have remained to be completed. So I guess looking at this picture, think, if you will, about what conclusions you could draw regarding the situation we're in. Now, if any of you have seen a similar approach, some people refer to this as more or less spend plan management, where the red line indicates our intention to spend a certain budget over a period of time. And, of course, we're tracking our actual costs against that. Things aren't going so well, are they? That's certainly one conclusion. But the main point here is that from a program management point of view, it's certainly a consideration to take a look at your cash flow, to take a look at what resources you consume compared to what budget you have available. But what we'd like to begin to do within the realm of program management is begin to focus on the work and managing the work. And this view doesn't really give us much insight into how much work has been done. We do have an indicator, that being the schedule milestones, that provides some information regarding work accomplished. Certainly we can see that we've got 2 milestones finished. There was a milestone due at the end of June, but that has yet to be completed. But looking at the budget versus actuals, I mean, it simply indicates what we plan to spend versus what we actually spent at any given time. And it would be much more useful if we had some type of quantifiable measure of how much work has been done in order to be able to use that in our decision making going forward. Because after all, that's what this is all about. It's really about making better decisions in the future and understanding how our past might provide us some information to assist us making better decisions. So you fundamentally have to ask yourself the question, if I'm trying to determine how much work has been done, what is my approach? How do I determine how much work has been done? Well, for me, that's really program management's key issue, is how do you measure your progress? And you do know that any of the work that you have laid out in your plan is going to fall into one of three states. The first two are rather trivial. So if an activity has not started, fairly simple to conclude that no work has been done, so you're going to take 0 credit, if you will, for that particular type of activity. The second situation would be if the work has finished or the activity has finished. Obviously, if that's the case and your finish includes having met some quality measures or exit criteria that you can take credit for that activity or task having been completed, then you're going to move that into the completion column, and obviously that work is done, and again, that's rather trivial. The third situation, though, is our work in process. In other words, work that has started but has not finished. How do you determine for an activity or task that's in process how much of that work has been completed, and how do you quantify it? So there's effectively three traditional approaches that we've laid out here. One is equating your work in process progress with how much has been spent. So if you're using this approach, you'd say, I've spent half the budget, I must be 50% complete. Well, intuitively, we all understand the pitfalls of that, and that that's probably not a good assumption. Just because we consume resources doesn't mean we necessarily get work accomplished or done. Second situation is likewise problematic. That's basing our progress on elapsed time. So this rule of thumb would say that if half of the time has gone by, so in our situation, in the scenario, we have a 12-month program, 6 months have gone by, we must be 50% complete. Many of you might know that that's in fact the default way that Microsoft Project and many other applications will calculate a percent complete. It's simply based on elapsed time. But we know that it's simply a false presumption that we would assume that just because half of the time has gone by means that we've accomplished half the work. The third approach, which you hopefully are using in lieu of the other two, is just basing your statusing of work in process. In other words, how much work has been done for activities that have started that have not yet finished, basing that on some engineers or technical leaders' subjective judgment. And you know, for small programs, that's probably adequate. For large programs, you're essentially taking an individual's personal opinion, and obviously if they are responsible for that work, they do have a vested interest in how they are statusing that work as an indicator of how much work has been done. We've all heard of the stories that, you know, a task is progressing nicely, and then of course it's kind of at the 90% complete point forever and ever and ever. Shouldn't we find a better way to status our work than just using some engineer's personal opinion or subjective judgment? And it's answering this question which led to the development of the earned value approach in terms of, can we find a better way to status in-process work, and can we quantify how much work has been done in a way that would allow us to compare it to how many resources or the volume of resources that were used, much less to the original plan that we had set out in the first place. So the notion is, let's find some credible, independent, objective ways that are divorced from personal opinion or these other approaches. We're not relying so heavily on instinct. In fact, I like to think of those three ways of statusing your work as the three evils of program management. We all know our friends, the little monkeys: hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. I think a good way to move forward is to find an alternative to these three approaches And in fact, that's what earned value was developed to try and answer and address in terms of a weakness in actually developing a clear picture of how much work has been done. Now, it turns out that if you go forward with that, there are significant other benefits that we will begin to understand here shortly. So what we're suggesting is, rather than use one of the three evils, let's use a method that's selected before the work commences that objectively and independently measures the work being done. And of course, that means that the definition of completion must also incorporate quality measures or technical performance measures so that we make sure that we're not just measuring activity, that we in fact are measuring the accomplishment or completion of work. And we're going to substitute this method that we choose in place of using percent spent or time elapsed or the engineer's subjective judgment in order to status our in-process work. This is the fundamental difference in using an earned value approach compared to a traditional project management approach. When we do this, that method that we select is going to have these types of characteristics. As I said before, it's going to be independent and objective. It's not going to be subject to personal opinion or bias. We will select the method before the work starts. Once the work starts, we're not going to change it because we know human nature is such that if we're given the latitude to change how we progress our work and things are not going well, we will take advantage of that in order to make things look a little bit more optimistic. Thirdly, we want our method to be rather simple. It's got to be straightforward. It's got to be easily implemented. We know as a fact that, as a rule of thumb, we're at least going to be statusing our work probably monthly. Some organizations will do it twice a month. Others will do it weekly. But typically, we're going to be doing it at least monthly. So it can't be a rather burdensome, laborious process in order to try and figure out how much work has been done, because it has to be a repeatable and consistent approach. It's also got to be easily understood, because statusing our work is the basis upon which we are going to be reporting to our customer, to executive management oversight, to internal management, as well as to our project team. So it's got to be something that supports good, facilitated communication across, within, and without the project team. And as I mentioned before, the method must not just be established to measure activity, but it must be one that incorporates whatever quality-based measures or technical performance measures we are attempting to accomplish as we develop our goals and objectives. So again, these are 4 characteristics of this method that we're going to adopt. In the earned value approach, we will refer to these as earned value methods. And quite simply, they are approaches for statusing your in-process work that do not rely on one of the 3 evils, that being percent spent, time elapsed, or an engineer's subjective judgment, and that we can apply rather rigorously and easily in order to understand how much work has been done. So now I present to you the same scenario, except we've added this additional piece of information. We still have that plan. That's the red line. And while we did use our schedule and our cost estimate in order to time phase that plan, in this case over 12 months, we now refer to it as our planned value. This is one of the key core metrics of an earned value approach. And basically, it represents a volume of work or a quantity of work that we plan to perform over the life of the program. So you can see that first line basically is saying that by the end of June, we expect to complete 30 units of work. And we call that the planned value. You can see at the end point, when we're done, we will have completed 60 units of work. So we've quantified the volume or the amount of work that will be performed over the life of the project. Now the blue line is as it was before. It's a measure of resource consumption what we call our actual cost. You'll see nothing has changed here. We've actually consumed 60 units of resources. But now we have this third measure, which is how much work have we done? Of course, we still have our schedule to rely on, and we're not going to change or ignore the schedule. It's still a very important management tool in our program management approach, and it likewise supports the development of your plan value, in other words, the time phasing of your resource plan. But now, in order to determine how much work has been done, we're going to use this earned value method we spoke about before. And you can see in this case, the earned value method is telling us at the end of June, we have completed 45 units of work. So the earned value is quite simply just how much work has been done at any point in time. In this case, at the end of June, we've completed 45 units of work. We can now look at that in relationship to what we promised we would do. The promise is the plan value. We promised to do 30 units of work by the end of June, but in fact we've done 45, so we've done more than we promised. So you would conclude here that we're ahead of schedule. Now we still have the issue of what resources we've used, 60 in this case. The traditional approach would have us compare that 60 to the spend plan. The spend plan said we thought we would spend 30 units of resources by the end of June. In fact, we spent 60. You know what? From a cash flow point of view, that's a problem. Something has to happen. We've either got to stop work because we no longer have authority to expend resources beyond the 60, or we have to go back and get additional authority and additional cash, if you will, to consume additional resources to complete the work. We do know the work is not done because that last several milestones had yet to be completed. So from a cash flow banker's point of view, that's important. But from the program manager's point of view, what's probably more important is we know we got 45 units of work done. What resources did we use in order to accomplish that 45 units of work? In this case, 60. So the comparison that's important to us in understanding how effective we are in converting resources into work, because after all, a project is nothing more than a system. And we know that systems have inputs and outputs, and there is some process that transforms an input to an output. In this case, our inputs are the resources, and our output is the work. We had consumed 60 units of resources. We produced 45 units of work. And if you're moving ahead of me, you've already started to capture the notion that, well, inputs versus outputs, we can start using this concept of efficiency in order to understand how effective we are at converting resources into the work that we must produce, which of course is the goal and objective of the program in the first place. You can see at this point in time that taking our output divided by our input is going to give us effectively an efficiency of about 75%. So for $1 of resource into our project, we're producing 75 cents of work out, 75% efficient. Now the fact is we still have work left to do. How much? Well, the total amount of work we must perform is the endpoint of our plan value. That's 60. So far, we've already completed 45 units of work, so therefore we have roughly 15 units of work remaining. And the notion is, looking forward, what resources and how much additional time do we need in order to complete that 15 units of work? And that's our forecast. Our forecast is laid out there. It's actually graphically appended onto the end of the actual cost line. And you can see this program manager is projecting that he will need an additional 6 months, and he or she will need an additional, let's say, 60 units of resources for a total of 120 units of resources. So again, this approach now is looking at the additional information in what we call the earned value, which is the amount of work that has been completed. That is developed not by one of the three evils, but by using what we call an earned value method that has those characteristics we spoke of before. And it gives us the ability now to compare and contrast what did we do versus what did we use or consume in order to produce that work, and then begin to adopt some measures of efficiency.